Well, we have a guest this morning that we're going to discuss some topics with. His name is Jeffrey Clayton. Jeff is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, a trade organization that is committed to developing the most efficient means for the pretrial release of criminal defendants by reducing the financial impact on government and taxpayers while maximizing public safety. Jeff has worked with major stakeholders and lawmakers on bail issues throughout the nation on both the federal and state level. Jeff, good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
So before we get started, since the coronavirus, has really started the issues within government, state and local, federal, state and local are starting to, heat up. One of the things right off the bat in Massachusetts, I noticed there was a big push to start getting certain inmates out of prison and pretrial type of, those being held before trial out of prison. And what came to my mind right off the bat, and speaking to a lot of people, whether it's on the air or just in general, there are a lot of people that assume that our prisons had a plan to deal with some, major crisis. And as I say, we never should assume anything. I'm not sure anyone would have ever assumed this was going to happen, but a plan. But from my perspective, a lot of what I'm seeing in certain jails and facilities through different states, there's definitely a lack of any type of plan in place. And, to debate whether we should be letting people, out, this, right now, to me is concerning on a number of different levels. I understand that, we have to watch out for their well-being in the prison or in a holding cell or whatever the case there be because of the overcrowdingness. But to let them out, what is it? What's the plan when they get out on the street? Are they safer inside or are they safer outside? Where are they going? And if they're in rehab or they need some sort of support system, is that have been aligned? One of the things, Jeff, I do find, and I have to say comical, and I don't mean to, make light of anything, but when I hear the word temporary release and they will be asked to come back or they will be brought back, I do have to snicker at that because I think if we ask ICE how temporary release has worked over the years, I think we'd get the same type of snicker from them. So, I want to get your take on some of this. I have some other stuff that we can go over, but, to me, it becomes a public safety issue. And I'm looking at some of the people that governors and mayors have decided to let out on the street. And I'm not sure if this is a political move or if this is really to keep them safe, but it's a crisis, and I never thought this would become an issue during such a crisis. I always thought that our systems had some sort of plan in place.
Yeah, I mean, what we've determined from coast to coast, and I work on this at a national level, is that the push by those groups on the left is, hey, these people should get out of jail because of the virus, and there's been very little opposition to that. In terms of do they have plans? I think you're right. A lot of them were caught kind of flat-footed, and some of them are doing a better job than others. There's a major issue here that I think is driving most of it, which is the cost of care. Do they want to have inmates in the jail that they're going to have to pay for the care? And to me, that's probably what's driving most of this, is how many people can I get out in case I get a massive infection and I'm going to have to, pay for that. There's been some debate as to whether it's safer or not. Is it going to help us contain the virus to let people out, or is it going to not? Is it going to make it worse? And the Texas governor, issued a letter an executive order suspending the rules of criminal procedure to stop these early releases, arguing that it made the COVID spread worse. And so, we're going to find out if the evidence supports that. I think the evidence is pretty thin both ways as to whether, letting all these people out is going to help us contain it or help us, or is going to make it expand. But what we do know is this is an at-risk criminal population that goes out. A lot of them have drug problems and that sort of thing. They have been isolated now. Are they going to go back to their house? If they have a house, are they going to go back to a place where they're not isolated? I mean, I think the jury's out, but it's kind of a fun debate. Gives us something to do at this point.
Right. But, I've and look, you try, when you read an article, you try to look into it. But when you read, whether it's true or not, it's written, and I assume from what I read in the article, there's some truth to it, that sex offenders are being let out and certain other high-risk type of individuals. I don't understand that. I don't know how anybody could even justify letting a certain level. We can all debate which level of individuals should be let out, but there has to be a stop point when there's a certain level of someone that's been incarcerated, not pretrial, that's being let out. I think the American public has enough on their plate than to worry about public safety at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, when you have the breakdown of sort of social order, you need criminal enforcement to continue, because right now we are all targets for criminal activity. We're in our house. We're not doing anything. But, that doesn't mean that there's going to be people going online and defrauding people or, things get worse in the food supply. And pretty much all of the suspects that have been released on the high levels, a lot of them have gone to commit heinous crimes. And we're seeing that right now. So we know that's the outcome. And, it's not popular for us to argue that. But you're right. I mean, this isn't the time to be doing this, to softening and letting repeat offenders go right back to it, right, when we're all trying to focus on this crisis.
Right. And, the prisoners may think this is their lucky day, when in reality it could, because we don't know, if they're safer in prison or if they're safer out on the street. But it may be their worst nightmare, it may be yet to come if they go, contract the virus just by being out in the street. So that, they don't know, we don't know. But again, there has to be some sort of protocol in a prison, especially after 9/11 in this country, whether it's a terrorist attack or something happened. And to see, like, your hands thrown up. Now, like in the state of Massachusetts, I wasn't surprised to see one of our rogue district attorneys, who is, as soon as she's been elected, has been nothing more than wanting to change the law and release people from prison. I wasn't surprised to see her. That was one of her first initiatives in the state. Never mind the fact that we didn't have the medical equipment that we need and the masks and everything else. That was her concern. But again, not to have something in place. I think a lot of people, and I'm just talking to people off the record, whether I'm in a quick conversation on the telephone, when they hear this, they're outraged. They're totally outraged. And then you take the fact where there are states that are saying essential business is not your local gun shop and you can't go buy a gun or ammunition. It for those that are legal gun holders and want to protect themselves and their family, there's a double standard here, and I think people get concerned over that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the idea that we're going to be, basically on house arrest in our house, and that we're going to let people out of prison who have shown that they're not going to be on house arrest. If they have the option, they're certainly not going to be doing that. And what are they going to be doing? They're going to be going out, committing more crimes and causing greater unrest. We just don't need it right now.
Right.
The Michigan Chief Justice was on a video discussion and saying, "Hey, this is our time. This is a historic moment for activism against jails." And no, that's not what we should be doing right now. And that's certainly not what we're doing, is arguing that we should make the system harsher right now on people. And, there should be more bonds for our bondsmen to post. We're not arguing any of that right now because it's just not the time. It's not the time.
But, it is at some point in time, it is a legitimate argument. I mean, the president has even talked about this, and I believe he signed a bill regarding prison reform not too long ago. But it is an argument we need to have, because there are a lot of people in prison that, first of all, based on the crime they committed, or quote unquote crime they committed, there are other ways to deal with those types of individuals. So I do understand the overcrowdingness, and I do understand what local sheriffs and states are dealing with. But just to have a blanket get out of jail card at a time of a crisis is not the way to go. But that's not what you're out there doing. You're working on legitimate ways to reduce the cost, at least from what I have read, within the state government, within the prison system, and yet be fair and keep those that should be behind bars, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're just trying to create the right balance. Some people should have to post bail, some people shouldn't. And, what we've learned through our work over, 2 centuries is that, we or a third party who stands in the shoes of the defendant do a good job of making sure they're doing what they're supposed to without trammeling their other liberties. So that's right. That's our view of the world.
And Jeff, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, I have a few more questions I want to ask you about just bail reform and prison reform in general, and the subject at hand. You're listening to Business, Politics, and Lifestyles. My name is Gary Goldman. We're speaking with Jeff Clayton, who is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. Jeff, when I look at some of these proposals across the country, and last night I did some quick math, totaling up different, states and how many prisoners they wanted to let out, or inmates, whether they're pretrial. I mean, I was in numbers excess of 50,000 if they got their way, every state and whom they wanted to let out. So we let them out. And you hear some. I'm hearing now a narrative, or the word is temporary release. What, in your opinion, Rick, can you explain to me what temporary release is? Because I'm not sure if you let someone out on temporary release, it's going to be that easy to go find them once this is over.
Well, right. What if they abscond? And for those who are already convicted, they're not on bail, which means there's no bail bondsman to go get them. Right. So there's no third party that's put up anything for them. So the temporary release is a joke. And if you're, particularly if the argument is you're going to have to go back to prison, because who would do that? I mean, just leave. Right. And right now, no, you think anybody's going to be chasing warrants around for the next 3 to 6 months? No. No. So, this is your time to go, have a field day, jack some people, rob some people, and get down to the beach for a while, because nobody's going to do anything about it.
Right. And those that, promoting these quote unquote, as you referred as activists, something happens that it's going to happen, Jeff. They're just going to throw their hands up. Oh, how could, we're sorry. We didn't anticipate this, which we know would be a bunch of rhetoric and shameful. But so I look at what you're trying to do, which I think is a great idea. We're always looking at ways to help, your states and your communities cut costs, and, that fine line between safety and who to release, when to release them. But do you think this will have an effect with those that may be on your side now that may turn around and said, look at what happened when we released all these prisoners. I'm not sure that we should be looking at bail reform right now. Do you think that there's a point that this could come back and haunt your organization?
I think so. I mean, I think there's going to be arguments on both sides. I mean, our collective wisdom is that we will, at the end of the day, show that this had no impact on containing the virus, and it exposed the public to greater harm for really no benefit. Other than avoiding costs of caring for prisoners in jails, which the state and taxpayers didn't want to have to pay for. Obviously, it could turn out to be worse, and I think that that's the plan of the other side, is to say, oh, hey, look, everything was fine. But you got to realize this is during the COVID virus, so I just don't think it's going to be a good example going forward. Everybody's going to say, well, that was a whole different situation at the time. And that if people who truly cared about their health probably would just go isolate themselves when they got out of jail. What percentage is that going to be? I don't know. But, it's hard to say right now. It's just such an unknown and unusual thing that we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. And
when you look at the regular flu, and I'm not saying that it's regular flu and this virus are two of the same. Obviously, they're not. But the regular flu can infect a population very quickly, and it kills a lot of people. And, will that be the next norm? We have a bad flu season. Once you set the precedent with those that are trying to especially use crisis as a way to push their initiatives, I think they're going to try it every possible way they can, let prisoners go or let inmates go, however you want to refer to them. So is that what we're setting up for the future? I don't know, but it's a scary thought process to think, if we let them go now, where does it end? Where do you set the precedent and say, this was a one time, okay, we made the mistake, or we're never going to do it again? I'm not sure that would work.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be an endless number of emergencies. Like, okay, we're fighting the war in Afghanistan, so I need to get out of jail, or whatever the reason is. For my view, 70, and I don't want to sound callous, but 7,500 people a day die in the U.S. anyway. And so, that's just the nature of being alive, is that people die. And unfortunately, we do the best we can on these things. But as I was just watching on the news, we got to get back to it here, because we're on the brink of another Great Depression, and the impact that will have will be 10 times, 20 times, 100 times the virus, not just on us, but developing countries. So the engine of the world needs to get started again. And
I think you touch on a great point, because look, no matter what people want to believe, okay, we're concerned about everybody's health. I'm concerned about everyone's health. Friends, family members, the American people, the world in general. But at the same token, if we don't get the economy rolling again, the word depression is being used a lot more than I ever thought I'd ever hear it in my lifetime, but there's some reality to it this time, Jeff. But if we think prisons and jails have overcrowding, wait till, God forbid, the economy stops or we get to that point, because there will be crime on the street like people have never seen. This is different than the first depression, years ago, because of just society in general. And I think we would be looking at an horrific event for the American people. But I think from a crime and possibly rioting and everything else that could take place, it may be something that you would probably think you'd only see in a movie.
I think so. I mean, I was just thinking last night, are we heading toward the Watts riots again? I mean, are we going through a period of where there's going to be massive turmoil and unrest? And I think if people don't get back to work, that's going to be the answer. Because, if you're a restaurant worker right now, what's your outcome on this? And, I know we have to do what we're supposed to here, and, maybe we just need to be more surgical about it. But I feel for the American people more so for the economic impact of this than the virus. And I'm not to be callous. I've had a family member who's passed away because of the COVID. But yeah, we got to get it restarted. Yeah,
because I think, what's happening now, and I think the media is using it. They're not telling us. They're telling us what they want us to hear and what perspective. But the story that also has to be told is, if we don't get back to work, what can happen? And when I said this to somebody yesterday, they said, well, you're talking to me about prisoners being let out. Now you're talking to me about possibly a depression. I said, well, do you want to hear the reality of the situation, or do you want someone to just sugarcoat it and tell you what something to sort of, keep you calm and at rest? The reality is this country does not work unless the economic wheels are turning. We've never been in a position, a recession, I tell, Jeff, is totally different than what we're dealing with now. The recession, we're working to some degree at a slower rate, but people are working. There is some economic activity going on. It doesn't take much to drive around in any community in this country now, Jeff, to see that nothing is going on except your local drugstore, maybe a coffee shop, and your grocery store, and that's about it. And America was not built on that, and America will not continue to last like that. It's not going to happen.
No, a good friend of mine owns a small business. He had no choice. He had 11 employees. He has one employee right now. If the business isn't happening, you can't make payroll. And in his case, I mean, it's going to be months, maybe even years before he gets part of his business back. So, it's just, people have to face the harsh reality. And unfortunately, we've quarantined everything and everybody. And maybe we've gone a little bit too far.
Yeah, only time will tell. Jeff, where can people find information about your organization or give you a call?
AM Bail Coalition. Yeah, ambailcoalition.org is our website, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Jeff, I appreciate, taking the time. I debated having this conversation, but because, you try to keep it upbeat, but this is, to me, I think the American people and the listeners within my voice need to understand what is happening around them. We're dealing with a horrific crisis. We're dealing with an economy that's in trouble. There's no other word. And we're also dealing with the fact that maybe some dangerous people may be amongst you. And I think we have an obligation to tell them that.
I think so. And, this is not the time to lose faith in America. It's the time to renew faith in America. And I think that's what's going to get us through. Not tearing down public institutions because of some crisis. We're better than that.
I agree with you. And Jeff, thank you. Stay safe and healthy, my friend.
Thanks, you too.
It's scary times. It's probably a conversation a lot of people don't want to hear, Ted. They look at it as negative and inciting fear, but I think it's fear. It's the reality, and we have to talk about the reality of the situation.
We have to be real. This is not a exercise.
No, and to use this situation to open the doors of prisons and jails when we're not sure if that's really going to help.
That's just like gouging.
It's no different than gouging.
Juicy political opportunity.
You're listening to Business, Politics, and Lifestyles. My name is Gary Goldman. We'll be right back.